I think we're recording or broadcasting, so I'm going to hold the microphone up. I feel like I should be doing stand-up, but hopefully be entertaining for you as well. So as David mentioned, I'm Irwin Lazar. I work for an organization called Nemertes Research, and I'll spend a minute introducing us and what we do, and then talk to you about some of the research that we've done over the last year and what we see as kind of the key future trends or where we see the collaboration market going. So I'll define what we mean by that and so on. We've got plenty of time, so please feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. We'll have some time at the end for Q&A as well. All right. Good. So just to introduce myself, I've been an analyst now for about 15 years. Prior to Nemertes, I was at a company called Burton Group, which is now part of Gartner. Prior to that, my background was in network engineering, so I kind of came from the network side into the voice side, into the collaboration and video side. Speak at a bunch of different conferences, write at a bunch of different places. Grew up in Long Island, still a Giants fan. Any Giants fans? Okay, good. I figured since I'm in New York, I'd mention the Giants and not the Washington Nationals, which is kind of my team now, but I know a lot of Mets fans here, so I'm sorry, didn't mean to mention that. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So David asked me to quickly take a couple of minutes. For those of you who are not familiar with the MCCA, they're the organization that's putting on this week's event. The key aspects for you to know, if you're not familiar, it's a nonprofit, technology-neutral association organization that allows for these kind of events where people can come together, meet one another, network, as well as hopefully learn from some of the speakers that you've had the chance to see. So if you have any further questions about the MCCA, if you're interested in joining, David, I'm sure, will be happy to talk to you. I believe Carol will be at dinner tonight, and Ann is somewhere around as well, right here. Okay, great. Okay, and David already mentioned the prize drawing, so let me go ahead and skip that. All right, so let me share with you our research. I mentioned we're a primary research organization. We spend our time going out and talking to end users, buyers of technology. We do studies throughout the year in a variety of different technology areas. I focus on video conferencing, unified communications, which covers telephony, meeting applications, messaging applications, and so you'll see a lot of that reflected. We also cover cloud and data networking, security, as well as contact center and customer engagement. So everything that I'm going to present comes from a study that we did earlier in or mid-2019. We went out to about 630 end-user organizations. We gathered data through interviews, through surveys, through surveys of people we know. We work with some third-party survey houses. We guarantee anonymity of anyone who speaks to us, so we don't share, company X is doing X, Y, and Z, and here's what they're spending. And the folks who participate in our research either get compensated through gift card or through copies of the results of the research. So what I'm hoping to represent to you is kind of the voice of the customer for those of you who are on the vendor side, for those of you who are on the end user side. How many are end user organizations versus vendors? Okay, so a few, small. Hopefully this will either confirm what you're doing or give you some insight or some thoughts as you're planning on your forward strategy. We look at the technologies, we look at the providers, we look at the costs, we look at the trends, and we look at how people are justifying their investments in technology. I'm going to spend a fair amount of time talking about that. So the study that I'll be referencing, I mentioned we did it in mid-2019. We're getting ready to refresh it shortly. 645 organizations, about half are based in North America, about a third are Western Europe, and another third are Southeast Asia, specifically Australia, Singapore, and a couple in Japan as well. Wide variety of industries, average employees about 8,300, and average revenue about 5.2 billion. So we go after a very large segment of the market. Anything from 20 employees and up is fair game for us when we're doing our research. All right. So the core focus areas, as I mentioned, we define, we call it workplace collaboration. Some people still call it unified communications, but it's essentially the intersection of real-time collaboration. So a lot of what Google talked about earlier on that very left side of their Google G Suite chart. So we're looking at calling and telephony, voice type applications. We're looking at meeting applications, which are now in what we're seeing kind of ubiquitous with video. We talk video conferencing. We're also talking meeting applications. And finally, team collaboration applications, the Slacks, the Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx Teams, and so on. Along all of that, we're looking at application integrations and management strategies, security strategies, and so on. All right. So I wanted to kind of throw, how we've seen tell a story about how we have seen collaboration changing within organizations, and more importantly, how organizations look at their collaboration investments. So I'm sure you're all familiar with this. We've seen a continual complexity of collaboration. It used to be, 10, 15 years ago, if I needed to work with somebody, I simply sent them an email, or I picked up the phone and called them. God forbid, we actually would use the phone. Or walk down the hall and knock on someone's door. And then when I went home, I'd turn my computer off and I could have a life outside of the office. Today, a lot different. We have lots and lots of different ways that we communicate and collaborate, and it continues to get more and more complex. And now at the top end, you're seeing things like virtual reality, there's a set of goggles here, augmented reality, AI, really becoming a lot of the big themes of what we see going into the future around collaboration. So from the enterprise IT perspective, as well as the user perspective, the more ways we have to collaborate are certainly a benefit in lots of ways, but they're also a negative because it becomes harder to know what to use. And as we have seen in our research, and I assume you've seen this as well in your lives, it's not necessarily one platform anymore. I use Zoom in the morning, I use Cisco in the afternoon, I use Microsoft in the evening because I'm jumping around depending on what my customers are using, or I'm using, or my partners are using. So it becomes more and more of a complicated scenario to figure out what's the right tool to use. So we're seeing, I guess, a level of frustration, and in a lot of the conversations I'm having with my end user buyers, they are looking for, what's the standard? They're still in the mentality of what should the standard be? What platform should we pick? And that may not be a realistic approach anymore. So the second challenge that we've seen as the technology's got more and more complex is how do you measure success? I mentioned I came from a networking background. We had a really good measure of success. If the phone didn't ring, it worked. We moved on to the next problem. VoIP was awesome because when you roll out VoIP, if it doesn't work, the phone doesn't ring. So that's even better from a network operations perspective, although somebody will figure out how to get in touch with you. That's where we spend probably 20 years or so around the collaboration market is roll something out, it works, tests run, come back good, we'll manage it. The light will turn red if there's an outage, and we'll worry about it then and fix it. A few years ago, it started to change around toward adoption. And if I'm rolling out applications like Skype for Business or WebEx, GoToMeeting, whatever, if I'm paying for these applications, I want to understand, are people actually using them? So when we would ask the IT leaders that participate in research, how do you measure success? That was what was coming up more and more. I want to know, again, if I put this application out there and people aren't using it, I've wasted my money. If they are using it, I have that kind of implicit assumption or guess that I think there's some value there. We've seen in the last 2 years when we ask IT leaders how they measure success, a swing toward the right, which is, okay, now I've rolled it out. People are using it. What does that mean? If everyone is chatting on Slack and all they're doing is sending goofy pictures to one another, or making plans to go out for Friday happy hours or whatever, does that really bring any value to my company? And this is the area that companies have really struggled with. They want to measure tangible return on investment. In some cases, you can look at cost cutting. So I roll out a new unified communication platform. I eliminate legacy products. I go to the cloud. At the end of the day, I'm saving X amount of dollars across operations, CapEx, and so on. Revenue gains, can I respond faster to proposals, opportunities, to customers, increase customer retention? That's another one that can be, you can find some decent measurements there. The last one is around efficiency improvements. How many of you saw the Google presentation before lunch? So one of the things he mentioned is, well, we have fewer meetings. No, we really don't have fewer meetings. We have more meetings. So that's something that has been, I guess, the black art is how do we measure efficiency gains? We've seen a number of organizations that have told us that they are looking at start to finish repeatable type projects, provisioning new employees, setting up customers, how long it takes us to get a product out the door on average. Maybe went from 6 weeks to 4 weeks once we rolled out video-enabled communications or team collaboration or so on. So what we looked at in our research is we captured the folks that have been able to quantify some value, one or more of cost saving, revenue improvements, productivity gains. We then looked at who was doing that better than average, and we defined that as our success group. And then we looked at what are they doing differently from a lot of other organizations. So you'll see a number of success correlations as we go on. All right. So I mentioned it's still kind of a black art in terms of being able to determine if there is some value for your collaboration investments. About 22% of companies, almost 23, told us that yes, we are measuring value. And in most cases, they're measuring efficiency gains. They're looking at, how long does it take us to respond to a sales opportunity? How long does it take us to get a change request through a software development process if we are using, say, a team collaboration app versus if we were doing it via email in the past or whatever other project management tool we had. About 45% said that, and so this chart here breaks out that blue chart. So of that 23%, this is how it breaks down in terms of how they measured success. And they can potentially measure success in more than one area. New revenue has been the lowest, so it's been harder to tie revenue enhancements into improvements in collaboration technologies. We then broke out the average improvements in terms of the size of the organization. That's sized by number of employees. So you could see pretty close on small mid-size in terms of efficiency gains. Revenue and savings gains skew a little bit higher on the mid-size and large company. So it does give you a sense that there are these opportunities, and if you're selling to enterprises, you want to couch your product solution service into how can you help them realize some tangible benefit. Obviously, if you're an enterprise and you're looking at justifying investment in technology, you want to look at how do I achieve some of these savings, and we've got a number of case studies as well. Okay. So given that we've got the increasing complexity of technology, we've got the drive toward realizing some tangible value, I wanted to share with you where we see the core areas that we're in our research that enterprises are investing in, and some of the trends that we're seeing that are driving some of those value propositions. So the first one has been a challenge, is that collaboration budgets are still pretty flat. So it kind of, again, leads you back to that need for a positive business case. It's not. It's harder and harder to justify collaboration for collaboration's sake. We're not going to roll something out just because we think it's going to have value, but it has to have tangible value. It'll be really interesting to see how this changes now as coronavirus concerns start to lead people to revisit their work at home strategies and being able to support work at home. Will there be rapid changes in investments to enable more effective telework? We looked at annual budgets, so we found about 40% said it was flat, about 29% saying that they were increasing, a very small sliver saying they were decreasing. And the average spend, and this is only on application licensing, for our success group was about $213. And you can see that's a little bit under the overall spend. So the companies that are more successful are actually spending a little bit more strategically, and they're spending a little bit less because they're making smarter, more thought-out decisions. You'll see that in a minute again. And for those who are increasing their budgets, it's going up by about 13%. So it tells you again, in the context or the constraint of spending is still a major issue related to collaboration investments. Okay, so second key point, cloud. We heard a lot of this morning in the previous session. Our numbers, of all the data, we put out about 160 slides. This was the one that I think I was most shocked by in looking at the data. So the green line are the folks that are hybrid, meaning they've got some of that calling, meeting, messaging applications on-prem, some in the cloud. So that's falling pretty quickly year over year. The red line is on-prem. That's kind of noise, about 2%. It was within our margin of error, so I don't really see that as much of a trend. The cloud, the folks that are 100% in the cloud went from 12% up to 19%, skewing more towards smaller companies. And then those that are hosted, meaning that they're having some third party build and manage a solution for them, stayed about flat. So you could see the trend toward UCaaS, toward pure cloud solutions. But the big takeaways, I think, are the numbers that tell you where the future is. So we asked those that are on-prem, what are your plans to go to cloud? 32% said they're moving to cloud already. We are going. 11% said we're moving to cloud. 32% said we're looking at it. So of that percentage that's on-prem, 43 roughly are either committed to going to cloud or evaluating a move to cloud. Tells you that on-prem market is going to continue to shrink. Of those that are hosted, typically these are folks running Cisco HCS, Microsoft Skype for Business. In both those cases, those vendors are pushing them to a pure cloud solution, or at least have that option now for them. And so of the hosted folks, 62% that are either evaluating cloud or planning to move to UCaaS. So they're moving to a multi-tenant system versus a customized solution. The correlations that we found that correlate with those groups, those companies that were in our success group, are that they do this thoughtfully. They don't just say, there are plenty of companies I've talked to where the new CIO came in and said, we're going to cloud. Everything's going to be cloud. That may not be the best approach because it could end up costing money and not aligning the features that are available in the cloud with what the needs are of the organization. So we found the companies that are hybrid tend to be a little bit more successful. They're paying attention to the network, especially as they're using video. So they're deploying SD-WAN to guarantee, or at least hopefully guarantee, the performance of those applications, which are now typically end user to cloud versus end user to data center. So it's changing the network design. Especially for cloud voice, they're bringing their own SIP services, especially mid to large size companies, meaning I'm bringing my own SIP trunking to a Zoom, to a Microsoft, to a Cisco, and saying, I want to control my phone numbers. I don't want to be locked in. I'm getting better rates than you're going to be able to give me. I have calling and routing plans set up that I don't want to forfeit. So we're seeing a big momentum toward what's often called bring your own carrier SIP trunking. And then making sure you're addressing the little things. E911 has become another big issue in the last, what day are we now? The 25th? So on the 20th, 20th or 21st, I can't remember, a new federal law went into effect called Carrie's Law, which mandates three things. One is any phone you pick up anywhere has to allow for direct dial and 911. You can't require somebody to hit an 8 or a 9 to get an outside line. So they have to be able to pick up any phone in a hotel room, lobby, whatever, hit 911, and they get immediately to the 911 operator. You have to notify someone that that call has been placed. So security desk in most cases. And the person answering that call has to be a certified public safety answering point. You can't terminate a 911 call at your security desk. Say, okay, we got it. We don't have to call the authorities. So that is only for new installations. So don't panic if you're not compliant today. It is only for newly sold, newly installed systems, but it's probably going to be hard to say that you're not compliant for existing solutions. So we're seeing a lot of interest among enterprises to get compliant. There's another law that just came into place that won't be in effect for another year called Raybaum's Act. It's a rewrite of the communication. I can't remember the name of Raybaum is actually an acronym, but it essentially requires that when you transmit 911 call information to an operator, you provide something more granular than the front door of the building. So floor, wing, cubicle, section, something that helps first responders know where they're supposed to go. So that'll be required for new fixed line systems in February of 2021 and February 2022 for all mobile applications.
Can I ask you two questions?
Yeah.
My own habit. When you say that the people are evaluating UCaaS or evaluating the move to cloud, are they evaluating to be all in and replace, or are they evaluating to try? Was the first question. Or was it all over the place?
It varies. In some cases, they want to go to cloud, like I mentioned earlier. They have that mentality that we want to be a cloud-first company. In other cases, they're doing due diligence right now that will tell them, does it make sense to move everything?
They're doing some trials or some things like that. And the other thing is, just, and I know you don't have all the data on one slide, that's why you want to subscribe to Nemertes Research, but that skews differently regionally across the globe, I would assume. So one of the things I found out coming back from ISE is as you go to some of the European and Eastern European countries, it's almost like you're going back in time with things going. So do you account for that in the research?
Yeah, we do publish cuts by region, by size of company. It's true. Cloud tends to be more aggressive among smaller companies in North America. Larger companies as well as companies in Europe, Asia especially, tend to worry more about privacy of information stored in the cloud, or they have things like GDPR that they have to be able to support.
They're actually interested in what is our next hardware bridge. They want to know how can they replace the ones they have. They're not even considering cloud usage. It's amazing.
Yeah, good luck. Okay, great. So jump to next slide. Third key trend has been we're now in a team-centric collaboration environment. The idea that companies are, still buying a video system, a phone system, and a IM platform is rapidly going away. A lot of this is driven by the vendors. Really, right now, every vendor in the UC platform space is now, even Google recently rumored to be doing this, is building around a team-centric user interface. So RingCentral through Glip, Zoom now has a team app. Microsoft has gone all in Microsoft Teams over the last 2 years, Cisco WebEx Teams, 8x8, you name it, they all have team-centric collaboration viewpoints. And we have seen the blue line is really the one to focus on. That's team collaboration adoption from 2017, 2019. About 34% of companies that are now using this. It's still 2/3 of those are siloed, meaning they've got it in different pockets of their company, but not enterprise-wide. If we fast forward, I don't have it on this chart, but we looked at plans for 20 and 21. We'll be a little bit north of 60% by the end of 21. We're starting to see pushes now to leverage team collaboration, not just in the back office, but for frontline workers who are out in the field. And really, that becomes the hub for work. That becomes the place you go to communicate with, today, mostly internal coworkers, tomorrow, potentially partners, customers, suppliers, et cetera. We asked folks their viewpoint. Do you look at a team collaboration app as this is our new UI? Or is it just another application you throw out there? Okay, that's our messaging app. Go use Slack, but we're not going to touch anything else. And we found only about 28% of folks that have that mentality right now. The team collaboration is our hub. We're going to build our application integrations into it and data flows and workflows and so on. Of that 28%, we then looked at who's in the success group. So given a pretty small percentage of companies that are saying that team collaboration is our work hub, half of the folks in our success group have that viewpoint, that blue bar on the left, 47%. Only 23% of our non-success group have that viewpoint. So if you're looking for something that correlates with measurable return on investment for collaboration investment, adopting team collaboration, making it the hub for work, integrating workflows, integrating other applications into it is a pretty strong correlator.
Can you explain that, what you mean by success group? I don't know if everybody here knows what you mean.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier the success group are those that either save money, made money, or recognized some process efficiency and did so at a higher average than the rest of the pool. We looked at a couple of different correlations in terms of deployments. So companies that had deployed team collaboration company-wide, meaning they had a standard, maybe more than one, but at least they had one standard, were more likely to be successful, especially if they had extended it out into the contact center so that agents, we've seen examples where a call comes in, agent spins up a chat room, invites some people in, has a discussion with support personnel, answers the customer inquiry, and away they go, then close the room at the end of it. So you're starting to see contact center tying in pretty tightly. Having the flexibility to support more than one app. A lot of companies that we talk to right now are in a world where there's pockets of Slack, there's pockets of Mattermost, there's pockets of 2 or 3 other apps. And they want to move to a single app. But moving to a single app and getting rid of those other apps generally isn't a successful approach, simply because the single app may not be able to meet all the needs. And you've got developers in a lot of cases that have built workflows in that are not easy to port into, from one app to another. And then distributing the management, allowing individual work groups to control things like channel creation, channel deletion, access rules, things like that all correlate with success. And then finally, training people on how to use the apps. Most importantly, is training them on how to manage notifications. How many of you use Slack? Okay, so like in the first couple of weeks, it was constant. I'm getting notified about everything, every post in every channel. I don't care about most of this, so now let me figure out how to start weaning those down. So if you train people ahead of time how to use the snooze button, how to mark channels or spaces or team rooms or whatever they're called in different vendor vernaculars, how to limit the amount of interruptions they're getting, how to tie it. In some cases, you see integrations with Calendar that will block notifications when your calendar shows you as busy. All of those tend to correlate with success. Fourth area, video. So kind of, I think, near and dear to a lot of people's heart. We have seen just an explosion of video. We're actually in the middle right now of launching a video-focused study that's looking at room systems, streaming video, live event broadcast-type solutions, so on, trying to gather data about what companies are doing in those areas. 76% of our organizations told us that they had room systems deployed now. On average, it was about 20% of rooms, maybe a little bit less. But poised to grow pretty rapidly over the next couple of years. 68% now have desktop video enabled to more than half of their desktops. Again, that's been on a very strong upward trajectory. And we have found a couple of success correlations. The first is if people have video and have access to it and use it, you tend to get all those benefits we talked about earlier, improved customer service, revenue enhancements, higher productivity gains, and so on. Having a single provider, what I mean by that is if you're operating an environment where, when you walk into a room, the first thing you have to do is pick up the card and figure out what kind of room it is and how you're going to start a meeting is a little more challenging and doesn't correlate as well with it's the same experience in every room. So no matter what room I walk in, it's the same pad, it's the same equipment, it's the same back-end solution and so on. All are success correlations. And then again, having proactive training, proactive management, and becoming a video-first culture, which has been a challenge for a lot of organizations. It's the old, if my boss is using it, then I'll use it. If she's not or he's not, then I probably won't. So creating that upper management buy-in into the investment is key. Okay. And then number 5, we're moving into an application world. I think this was also mentioned earlier. So the term citizen developer is now coming up. The ability to build workflows in just about any application, the ability to build codeless applications where you don't even need to know how to code. All of those are starting to enter the workspace, and a lot of focus on how do we integrate our collaboration applications with our business applications. I spent yesterday talking to a company that's trying to set up provisioning of their voice and video infrastructure with their HR, with ServiceNow, not ServiceNow, SuccessFactors. So when they onboard a new employee, it automatically triggers APIs or calls to different applications that has that employee's phone, video application, email, you name it, all configured at the minute that they're onboarded into the company. We have found today this is still pretty light. So only about 7% in 2019 that said they had application integrations. About 10% that were planning on it. In most cases, that application integration was click to call into the team space. So I've got Microsoft Teams, Slack, Cisco WebEx Teams. I click a button and it makes a phone call, or it's extending it into CRM, ERP. So Salesforce integration is really popular. Click on a phone number in Salesforce, that opens a soft phone window, makes a call out to the customer. That level of integration is pretty easy. So a lot of off-the-shelf integrations, but also a lot of opportunity to do more complex integrations if you have development talent. If you look at the kind of the 3, the blue, the gold, the green, that's by the end of 2020. We're at about a little over a quarter of organizations that are doing application integrations. About 28% of collaboration teams now have in-house development as part of that team. So they're not just focused on rolling out applications and supporting those apps, but they have developers that are looking at how do we build workflows to meet the needs of our customer. This is where it gets really interesting. I mean, I've seen, my favorite one that I've seen recently was security integration. So if somebody triggers an alarm in a building, it activates a camera, it pops up a feed on the security desk, it then opens up a chat room and pulls the video feed into that chat room so the security team and facilities teams can look and see what's going on. Is it a fire alarm? Is it somebody trying to get into an unauthorized area? Some of those kind of complex workflows would have been unheard of even 2-3 years ago. So where the success is going out to line of business and becoming liaisons and working with line of business to understand what do you do and how can I leverage some of the capabilities for workflow integration to make your job easier. I mentioned about 28% of hired developers, about a similar amount are doing development within their collaboration group, meaning they're not going out to other groups in the company or they're not outsourcing it, but they have in-house developers. And then about 6% are using CPaaS. CPaaS, if you're not familiar with it, is essentially pay-as-you-go communication components. So I want to build an app that texts, I'm a doctor's office, and I want to build an app that texts people to remind them of their appointment. That would be done through a communication platform as a service vendor. I pay half a cent every time I send out a message, and I can easily get that up and running in a couple hours versus having to buy a communication platform connected to the PSTN and figure out how to do it that way. All right. And then I normally do a top 5, but had to do one more. So I wanted to kind of ground everybody a little bit on AI. This is there's not a presentation from a vendor I've sat in the last year where AI wasn't front and center. And there are a lot of really cool things happening around AI. I think David can talk about some of the things Poly's doing, and pretty much any of the vendors that are here have some neat AI that they're doing. We are still finding it among the buyer side. AI is kind of a nice to have. I'm interested, but it's not front and center for me. It is if you run a contact center. if you run a contact center, you are heavily investing in AI because you need to differentiate yourself in terms of customer service, so you want to take advantage of the ability to recognize who customers are, why they might be calling, optimize that customer experience. If you're on the UC collaboration side, the AI capabilities to improve the meeting experience, to take notes and publish a transcript at the end, auto framing, better sound cancellation, voice-controlled endpoints, all of those, again, are kind of cool. But we haven't found yet at this point that enterprises are willing to pay for those. They are looking at it as a differentiator. So if vendor A comes in with all these whiz-bang AI capabilities and vendor B doesn't have that, that's going to make vendor A look a little better. So for those of you who can't read the chart, what it shows is about 4% were adopting personal assistants, 5% that are adopting AI capabilities from their collaboration vendors. And there are some standalone vendors like Otter.ai as an example that does meeting transcription. About 2% that are doing augmented reality. In most cases, they're looking at it for training purposes. I can put somebody in an Oculus and give them a training experience that I couldn't give unless I could fly them to a classroom. About half of the red bars, roughly, are folks that have not even thought about any of these technologies, and the green and yellow bars are those that are either planning to deploy or evaluating. So I think this is going to change over the next year, again, as technologies start to become more front and center. Lots and lots of challenges related to things like facial recognition and voice recognition and privacy-related controls. We have found a lot of interest from enterprise customers we talk to for the ability for a video system to know how many people are in the room, even if it's not a video call. I can count that there are 3 people just sitting in here working, and I can publish a utilization report for that room space. So at the end of the month or end of the year, I can look at my rooms and figure out, are they overutilized, underutilized? Should I redesign my floor plan to make more efficient use of my space? That's all really cool information. When you get to the point where I'm recognizing people, and so, hi, Ann, welcome to the meeting. Would you like me to go ahead and start the video call for you? That starts freaking people out. And especially we talked about some of the cultural issues, especially outside the US, we see more of it. So the question becomes, okay, you now know who I am. How did you capture my biometric information? Where is it stored? What happens when I leave the company? How do you control who owns that? What if it leaks or is hacked? So we haven't found yet that people are willing to make that leap into facial recognition, but yet it's a pretty big focus for a lot of the vendors that are looking at using facial recognition to improve the experience. So again, a number of the different ones that we talked about earlier. And then we did look at the success factor. Those numbers are about 4 to 5% for voice assistants, AI, and about 3% for augmented reality. You can pretty much double, almost 2.5% improvement or increase for the companies that we mentioned earlier were in our success group, meaning that saved money, made money, or guaranteed or showed some efficiencies. So there are correlations that show that taking advantage of note-taking capabilities that transcribes a meeting, issues highlights, issues action items, could have some improvements in productivity because, generally you're sitting in a meeting going, hey, did anybody capture that? That was a really good idea. Well, you're ensuring that there's an intelligent assistant that's capturing information and action items. So with that, just to wrap up, we see a lot of change in collaboration. It's fortunately good for all of us here. Where the next 5 years go as AI becomes more mainstream are pretty exciting. Cloud is really where I think people are heading. It's where our data shows a lot of interest. We talked about team collaboration. We talked about APIs, contextual integration. I think all of those are really key in thinking of collaboration as a platform rather than a set of applications. So we have a platform with X amount of capabilities, APIs to interface that with other business applications, and hopefully the ability for users to customize their experience. If you're not investing in collaboration, you're not looking at taking advantage of some of the emerging technologies, you do risk the potential of falling behind. You do risk the fact that you may end up not being able to move as quickly as other organizations. And again, I think if we see that now, companies that are not set up well for telework are probably going to run into some problems over the next few months. As an example, companies that don't have effective virtual collaboration may run into some issues. Proactively evaluate. I think that's probably the big takeaway. And I think the bottom line, again, if you're selling or buying, is what's the business value? If you can't answer that at the end of the day, if you're selling features still or buying features, you're really not doing it right. So with that, I think
Any questions?
a couple of minutes for questions.
Everybody still awake, right?
Yeah.
Any questions?
How many of you had the cream puffs that were back there?
What's the question from the movie? Cheesecake or strudel, right? What does Mindy sell more of?
No, they were, you see the giant cream puffs that were. Okay.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank
All right,
you.
appreciate it. Really good data. As I said earlier today, all of these presentations will be online.